Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming to this event. This is our IMG mentoring session, and it's part of the webinar series that FuturePedsRes residents holds to help inform uh, our applicants and connect them with some program directors and other faculty in this area who'll really be able to shed some light on important things that applicants may not be as aware of. Um, so Without further ado, many of you will have just seen this, but this is our webinar schedule for the year. Um, and I'll give it to Mahama to talk a bit about Future Peds residents this time.
Thanks, Banu. Hi, everyone. My name is Mahima. I'm a fourth-year medical student at the Carl Illinois College of Medicine, and I'm also one of FuturePedsRes co-directors this year. I have the honor of being co-director along with Morgan Chadwick, who's also on this call. Thanks again for joining us today, and we hope to have a productive session.
And my name is Banu. I'm incoming FY1 at the NHS Lothian in Scotland, and I just graduated from the University of Edinburgh, where I'll be an honorary clinical fellow starting next month. I'm one of the co-webinar leads, along with Jessica Richmond, also here with us in the call, who's an MS4 at SUNY Downstate College of Medicine.
And I also wanted to make sure to give a shout out to the FuturePedsRes APPD faculty advisor, Dr. Dell. Huge support from him and huge thanks to everything that he does to help us out. He is the Vice Chair for Education and Division Chief at Case Western Reserve and Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital, as well as Colleen Hughes, who does a lot of the work behind the scenes in helping us set up these Zooms. She's the Associate Executive Director for APPD. And then I also wanted to give a big shout out to FuturePedsRes, our ComCep faculty advisor, Dr. Rachel Thompson, who's the director of fourth year pediatric medical student education and advising over at the Boston Medical Center. So thanks to everybody for all their effort in helping organize these calls.
And I'll also just briefly address those who might not have been familiar with FuturePedsRes before this event. So we were an organization that was initially created during the 2020-2021 math cycle when everything went virtual with COVID, and it was quite difficult for applicants to get information, and people were feeling quite lost. And since then, we've grown and now have lots of initiatives aimed at connecting our future pediatricians who make up our leadership team as well as program directors, faculty, and other interested parties, such as our partners at ComCep and the APPD. So really happy to have all of you here, and also a special shout out to our panelists, who I'll briefly introduce now. So we're joined by Dr. Louis Crata, who's a pediatric program director of Brooklyn Hospital Center and is a pediatric rheumatologist. Dr. Miguel Sanchez, a pediatric program director at St. Barnabas Hospital and faculty of the Pediatric Resident Recruitment Action Team. Dr. Lavjay Bhutani, who's the immediate past president of ComCep and is the vice chair for academic affairs and chief of pediatric nephrology at UC Davis. Dr. Suzanne Wright, who's the pediatric program director and clinical assistant professor at Marshfield Children's Hospital. And Dr. Uzoma Okori, who is a pediatric associate program director and pediatric cardiologist at Marshfields Children's Hospital. So thank you all for joining us today. Um, I'll give it to Mahama to just speak a bit about how the evening's going to go.
Yeah, I just wanted to go over like a quick goals and agenda slide. So our webinar today is scheduled for just about the 1 hour time mark. Most of the session will be pre-planned questions for our panelists, advice on finding mentors and sponsors, especially to help navigate this particular pediatric residency virtual season. That's going to be a majority of it. And then at the end, we're going to leave some time, maybe 15 to 20 minutes or so for an open Q&A session. We just ask that everybody kind of respect the Zoom space and just put your questions into the chat. Thanks so much.
All right, and without further ado, we'll get started with a question for Dr. Krata. So, how many programs should IMGs apply to this cycle? And can you speak a bit about the 5 signals that are available in pediatrics this year and how IMGs can use these effectively?
So, I mean, I think, I've been asked this question many times. First of all, let me apologize for my video. Something must have happened to my computer, so I'm not really a ghost. I'm an actual person. But I could tell you that, I think the numbers change dramatically. Certainly anywhere between 50 and 100 is what I've heard, that a lot of IMGs do apply to. I think that seems sometimes a very high number. I think, again, the biggest thing you really have to do when you're looking at the programs that you're applying to is look at whether they sponsor visa, if you need a visa, whether they will sponsor your visa or not sponsor your visa. Look at the scores that they're looking at as well. All of those things will really try to help it narrow down so you really are not overly over applying. I have to say that when I've been asked this before, I don't know that there's actually a magic number. Again, I know that a lot of IMGs do apply to a very high number of programs, and I think again it really all depends on how strong you feel your application is, and really how much time or how much money you have in terms of your application process as well, because it's obviously very expensive to do all of that. In terms of the signals, I do think that we are looking at the signals. Some of us are looking at the signals very differently than others. At the last program directors meeting, they really discussed how a lot of the signals are going to the bigger programs. And I think that if you do send your signal to a program, they will look at that signal a little bit more critically and a little bit more positively than if you don't get one. I don't think that, again, a lot of places don't necessarily get a lot of signals. And they certainly do interview a lot of applicants who don't signal them. But I think that when you do get a signal, it sort of gives you a little bit more of a reassurance, or gives a program a little bit more of a reassurance that applicant really is considering that program, because there are only five signals that you're allowed.
Definitely. Thank you very much for the response. And um, always also to our other panelists at any point, feel free to add in as well. But for now, I'll move on to our next question with Dr. Sanchez of a few years ago now, but step 1 changed to pass fail. I think lots of IMGs still are wondering how supplemental components, such as things like regional signaling, the additional experiences sections, how these will be assessed and what IMGs should focus on.
Sure, thank you, and good evening, everyone. My name is Miguel Sanchez. I'm a non-US IMG. I'm the program director at St. Barnabas Hospital. And I was in your position a couple years ago, and I feel that this session is great because we didn't have something similar, so you should take advantage of all the sessions that are offered, through different channels. Regarding the question, I think it's a broad question because the ACG, the ERAS application supplement material, it's something that it depends on the program. There might be programs that will take into consideration certain components more than other ones. I would like to say that the most important component that I think most of the programs will take definitely is the step 2 CK result after the step 1, right? I think most of the filters will depend on that and the year of graduation. But regarding specifically to the supplemental materials, which, the signaling was already addressed, and I feel that, and I'm glad that I didn't have that question because I don't know a number, a magic number to recommend, but that was addressed already. But regarding the other supplemental material, which are geographic preferences, urban or rural settings, meaningful experiences, and past experiences, I think some programs will take into consideration one or two, or probably all of them, depending on the number of applications they have. Now, going one by one and super brief on four of those components, the geographic and setting experience, I think approximately, and correct me if I'm wrong, if someone else has updated data on this, but approximately 80% of residents that apply to pediatrics will select a geographic preference. And that 20% that do not select a geographic preference usually are IMGs, or the most of those 20% are IMGs. And most likely it's related because, IMGs do not have a specific boundary with a geographic setting, and they're open to apply in different settings. But and I think that's important to take into consideration, because when we are reviewing applications, my hospital is located in Mid-Atlantic, and this component might help, probably not as a filter, or at least that's what I think a lot of programs might not consider it as a filter, but it could be considered a tiebreaker. In the sense, if you have two competitive applicants, but one of them selects, your geographic setting, you might consider that applicant aligns with, where your hospital is located. Now, regarding the setting, if it's rural, urban, I don't know much about that, because, my hospital is located in New York City, but I feel that in a lot of ways is we're a community-based hospital. We do not take that much into consideration, because even though we're considered urban, I feel that a lot of times we are a rural hospital in population, in resources. So there might be other hospitals that will take that into account, and I think it's important to know what type of hospital you're applying to, if it's a community-based, if it's, a university-based, or what type of hospital, in order to know if they will take that into consideration. But I feel that it's a good tiebreaker. And if you're open to go, to different settings, probably you don't want to commit to a specific region. If I see an applicant that, the preference might be the West, and they're applying to my area, I might, not consider that applicant unless there's an explanation for it. And regarding, meaningful experiences, I think as an IMG, you wanna show, patient care, patient-centered care, the commitment with underserved population, or how you adapt to US clinical experience. I think that's important to mention there. Because a lot of times I feel that this is being used to show failures, which is okay, but I don't think you should put, if you failed, step 1, step 2, or if you had a red flag in your CV. I've seen that a lot of people will place all their meaningful experiences there, instead of putting something also positive of their application. And clinical experience, I think I think we do take into account that a lot of IMGs will have past experiences doing residencies, or working home, for a couple of months, years. And I think having that in your CV, especially pediatric oriented, I think it's a great it will boost your application, versus if you've been working, as a, urology in a urology clinic, or in an area that is not related with pediatrics. Probably that's something that might be a red flag, unless you are able to explain that either in the meaningful experience or in your personal statement. And I think those are, let me see if I missed any other supplemental component. Oh, and I don't know if I will include here letters of recommendation. I think, a lot of times I've been asked to write letters of recommendation, but I think you need to ask letters of recommendation from people that really know you, instead of doing just a general letter of recommendation that you can tell that it's, a copy paste from other applicants. I think it's valuable when we receive letters of recommendation from someone that really knows you and have worked with you, and know your what are you good at and your commitment with peds.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Thank you very much. That was a really good answer. On to question 3. So this one's for Dr. Bhutani. What's the best way to go about marketing oneself as an IMG? And one thing we also wanted to specifically ask about is step 3, as we know that that may have some visa implications or other implications for applications.
Thank you, Bhanu, and thank you for the FuturePedsRes organization for running this, and welcome everyone. I myself, like Dr. Sanchez, am a non-US IMG from India, and so it's always a special webinar for me. So thank you again for inviting me. I think the simple answer to this question, as far as the easy one, which is step 3, is absolutely yes. I think the more data, the more evidence that you can gather and present, the stronger the application will be, because unfortunately, all of us as IMGs are certainly at a disadvantage compared to non-IMG applicants. So I think if you can do the step 3 and of course, get a good score, then that will be of tremendous help. In addition to that, some of the other ways I think may have already been sort of touched upon earlier. I think the strongest way that you can show your skills, your personality, your ability to adapt is through away rotations, if you have the ability to do that. I know that's very challenging, especially if you're a non-US IMG, to both get visas and to get malpractice coverage. But if you have that ability, that would be the most important thing, and you can use that as an opportunity also to get a recommendation letter. Many people will come in and do some shadowing experiences. I would say they're better than not doing anything, but it's a little bit harder when you're shadowing to get to sort of shine and show your skills and also get a strong recommendation letter. Other ways, research, advocacy, showing that if you have sort of a gap in between when you graduated and when you're applying, that you've sort of done something related to the field of medicine, certainly can also make your packet stronger. And I think lastly, I would say choosing the right program was also, I think, mentioned earlier. Applying to those programs where there have been other IMGs that are more open and more receptive, and focusing your attention on those, and then knowing the strengths of a particular program, especially if they align with your passions, whether it's advocacy work or research, can help streamline your application process and also make you more competitive. I can't think of anything else unless anyone else on the panel would like to add other thoughts.
Hi, this is Suzanne. I don't know if you can see me with my sunshine in the window here. I'm from Marshfield Clinic, and I just wanted to say with step 3, that's hugely important if you, depending on what kind of visa you want to get. And there were some concerns this year with the pause in the J1 visas. So I would strongly recommend taking step 3 because it will qualify you for a different type of visa, which may be better for you and better for the program. The other thing I would recommend is that just getting it over with, because once you start your program, you would like to be able to focus on learning pediatrics. And step 3 is very adult focused, and you want to sort of just get that over with and sort of be done studying adult medicine and really be able to focus your energy on pediatrics. So I would highly recommend doing step 3 before rank time, if not before your application is due. The other thing I would say is in marketing yourself, we're a small program. We only take 6 residents per year, but we get 800 or more applications. So it can be really difficult to decide who to invite. So I would say I would use any networking any sort of colleagues that you know, and highlight those connections. So for example, if someone emailed me and said, my best friend from medical school is in the internal medicine program in Marshfield and really loves it, and I would love to be part of your program, that's a connection that would be meaningful to mention. But the other thing I would say is don't email the program director with a generic letter that suggests that you haven't even read the website, because that doesn't make you look as good. It's important to look like you've actually looked into the program and read about the program rather than just sort of mass emailing a bunch of programs. Okay, I hope that's helpful.
Thank you both very much. Those are really helpful points. And I'm getting a bit of a wrist cramp for writing everything down thus far. So thank you, everyone. Moving on to the next question with Dr. Wright. So given that IMG's graduation and application years may differ, what can they do to address this gap in the application or potentially other similar red flags?
Yeah, so if there is a big gap from when you got out of medical school to when you're applying to residency, I think it's just important to make that clear in your CV, what you've been doing each year that you've been out, as well as perhaps in your personal statement, describing some of the ways that you've continued to grow or experiences that you've had since graduation. If you've graduated more than 5 years ago, some programs will not look at your application. So that would be you might be in a particular disadvantage in that situation. It doesn't mean you won't get offered interviews, but it potentially will be harder. So for those people, I would think it's very important to really target your interviews and your applications to places where you can highlight some connections and that you can shine. And for example, let's say you're bilingual. Well, that's an amazing skill. So definitely highlight that because maybe that would be more important than the fact that you graduated 6 or 7 years ago. I hope that's helpful. I think that's what the question was after, but I want to let any of the other panelists also chime in on that.
Certainly.
I mean, I have to say that I think, again, I think what you were saying, Dr. Wright, is, it's important, and I think goes back to all the questions before. What you did in between med school and application is important. We want to see that you've been active. I think we want to see it doesn't have to be necessarily 100% clinical. It could be observational. It could be research. We want to see that you're still doing something and that you've had some interest. I think somebody again mentioned something about letters of recommendation. I think when you have your letters of recommendation, again, we're looking at that and we're looking at, I look now because of the pattern in application and the patterns in, pediatric residency application in particular. I'm looking for letters of recommendation that say pediatrics in them, because a lot of people do double use their letters of recommendation and they have these generic letters. And now a lot of people are using peds as their backup. And I don't want to waste my time interviewing people who are not necessarily really interested in pediatrics. And that's where I think, again, if you do pediatric or if you do something that's pediatric in nature, it's important to put that in your application as well. That, again, we know what you've been doing. If you did something before and you changed your mind and you want to do pediatrics, again, there should be some reflection on that in either your personal statement, in your meaningful activities, again, your letters of recommendation, because I think a lot of people now, or at least I'm very critically looking at my applications from the sense of, is this person really interested in pediatrics, or is this person just using me as a backup to potentially get in? And again, I don't want to waste my spot. And I've had a couple of residents who've come who were not really interested in pediatrics. One didn't last at all. One is going to stick it out. Despite the fact that when she arrived, she said she really wasn't that interested in pediatrics. So again, I think that's what's important.
I just want to echo that, if you don't want to do pediatrics, don't apply, because this is your career, this is your life. You want to love what you do. And so we see that a lot of IMGs are over applying, mass applying to different programs. And it's very different being a pediatrician than being someone who takes care of adult medicine. So, be really thoughtful in your application and ask yourself, is this something that you really love and want to do?
It's all really good advice. Thank you very much. And our last predetermined question for Dr. Corey, how important are US clinical experience opportunities for IMGs? and what typically counts as clinical experience. And additionally, this was more so an issue during COVID, but even now, for those without US clinical experience, how are they still able to succeed while applying?
Thank you, Banu, for those questions. So US clinical experience is important. It's very important. I think Dr. Bhutani had highlighted that it's your ability to make the connections, it's your ability to get the letter of recommendations. So things that you want to do, a lot of valuable information that we can get about your ability. How well are you aware of the U.S. healthcare system? So U.S. clinical experience can show that off. Are you familiar with electronic medical records? And your ability to adapt, as Dr. Bhutani said. So those are key things that the U.S. clinical experience can show or demonstrate. However, you can match without a U.S. clinical experience. It's not, you're done, you're sunk without it. No. Most programs would do a holistic review of applications, and there's more to that than a U.S. clinical experience. Remember, a bad U.S. clinical experience is also a liability. So you want to make the most of that. Going to the next question, what counts as a clinical experience? I guess three things. I think of it at CEO, clerkships, which medical students get to do. If you get an experience to do a clerkship, your rotation in the US, that's great. You're in, it's the same advantages that have already been highlighted, make the most of that. The externship that graduates can do, not just medical students, for the same reasons, offering hands-on experience where we can know, can you take a history? Can you examine a patient? Demonstrating what you're capable of doing. All those things are super important. And lastly would be observerships. The disadvantage here is you don't have hands-on experience. You're typically not permitted to take care of patients or attend to patients. But participation in presentation, clinical cases, rounds, conferences, your ability to demonstrate intellectual curiosity, those things count, right? And you can still build connections. So those experiences in that order, I would say all count, not equally, but are quite valuable. I think the last question would be, so those without a U.S. clinical experience, this might not be much of, let me invoke the example that Banu said, the modality that we're still here on, virtual. During COVID, there wasn't much travel. U.S. clinical experiences, there were very few of them. And yet, lots of programs matched IMGs. Again, hashing out the point that it's not, you're sunk without it. You can actually match without a U.S. clinical experience. So what can you do? Focus on what you have. You want to make the most of what you have. The whole thing, this framework that we use even in residency, we're assessing your attitude, you're assessing your skills, we're assessing your knowledge. So even if you're not having that in the US, you're going through medical training, you're going through programs, you're going through schools, make the most of those opportunities. The letters of recommendation from your attendings, people who worked with you, the connections, those things are super valuable still, even if it's not a US clinical experience. So in a nutshell, those are the things I'd say to focus on and be hopeful. Think of yourself, you're not a means to an end. One of the things I truly enjoy about IMGs and the whole experience, application experience, is this commitment to service. You guys lived through a pandemic and you still want to get into medicine and help and serve the public and take care of our children. So that's inspiring, that's great. And it's, again, thanks for inviting us and best of luck with the process.
I would like to add something. Sorry, Dr. Wright, but I wanted to add that, clinical experience is not only having the rotation, but trying to make the best that you can from that rotation. So meaning be the first one to be there, be the last one to leave the rotation, show interest, be part of the team. Even if it's a shadowing experience, it doesn't matter. I mean, you can bring articles, you can, be part of whatever sessions the program is offering you, because that speaks very well. It's not only having that experience and having that in your CV, but that is going to give you a very good letter of recommendation from someone that really knows you. So I just wanted to add that.
Yes.
I just wanted to add also that try to think outside the box in terms of what clinical experiences mean. We have one of our current residents who worked as an MA in one of our former graduates' office. And so she was the MA at the pediatrician's office, and he was one of our graduates, and he wrote her an amazing letter. And that experience as an MA really actually helped prepare her to work with our population of patients. And so just, even though you're more, skilled than perhaps an MA needs to be, an experience in the US healthcare system, even as a CNA or MA, I think is a great experience. And I would definitely include that if you have that opportunity.
Thank you very much, all of you, for those really good pieces of advice, both for this question and all of the previous ones. So now I'll hand it over to Mahama as we go to the next part of our evening, which is the Q&A. We'll just ask everyone to please be respectful of our panelists who are taking the time out of their busy schedules to speak with all of us. So just to put your questions in the chat, and if possible, to have questions be more generalizable so they can benefit everyone on this call and people who might be watching afterwards. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Banu. Thank you to our speakers. Looks like we have our first question in the chat is asking, how important is it to be ECFMG certified before applying for residency?
I can take that one. So I think it's as someone already mentioned that as a IMG, you're already on disadvantage compared to other applicants. So I think you don't have to be ECFMG certified, but I will strongly recommend to be ECFMG certified. Now, if because of the timing, you don't have your Step 2 CK yet, and you have enough resources to pay for, for applications, you're not gonna lose nothing by applying. But I think it's beneficial to be certified and have your application, and if in the middle of the interview season you get the certification, send an email or an update, an update email, to the programs that you're interested, letting them know that you receive your certification, because I think that that's extremely important when we're reviewing applications.
Okay. I just wanted to leave it open in case any other anyone want to say anything.
I think, certain, again, you have to look at certain programs. Our hospital, our GME office, if we're in, again, if we're going to rank anybody who is an IMG, they have to have their certificate pretty much, except for some of the Caribbean schools. So you really have to be pretty mindful about having your ECFMG certificate, because, or at least parts of it, because I think, again, when it comes down to the rank list, people are going to be cautious about those things because you're going to get stuck then.
Awesome. One more question the chat is asking about, is it a good idea to network with programs at the AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics, just to get the entire overlook of the program and make solid connections? So if anyone can speak to that.
I mean, I guess I'll say, I guess any connections you make, as long as they're, they've got to be positive. I mean, it's the same thing as we were talking about when you're doing an observership, or an externship. You have to be the person who will remember, and not somebody who they're going to say, oh, they were just, sort of annoying and pestering me the entire time. They wouldn't leave me alone. Again, it's difficult sometimes to be that right mix. But if you think you can be that right mix, then you can sort of make a connection, introduce yourself, tell them why you're interested in the program. If you have any connections with the program, if you know past graduates, if you know any of the attendings there, Again, that kind of thing, but I think, again, there's, you have to be able to sort of moderate what you're doing in terms of those connections.
Another kind of more broad question, given the current situation with giving J1 visas, do you think it will affect residency programs' willingness to offer interviews to IMGs?
I mean, I think we were certainly nervous about the visa situation with our current political climate, but we are very IMG friendly. We always have been, we always will be. And I think that there are a lot of programs that are even becoming IMG friendly who previously did not consider IMGs. So I guess I would say is don't be discouraged, shoot for the moon, go for what you really want. And there may be programs that are more open to you than they used to be in the past. But yes, we are a little bit nervous about the visa situation. That's why having the step 3, I think, is very helpful.
Awesome, thank you for that. I saw Dr. Bhutani already addressed this one in the chat, but the question was, is it bad to have older letters of recommendation, maybe 2 to 3 years old, when submitting applications? So if anybody wanted to say anything further on that.
I think I saw him say more current letters are certainly better, but it's a no to letter is better than no letter. A no to good letter that conveys the time frame of the experience, the quality of the experience, again, revealing your skills that shows I know this person and I can vouch for them would still count. So that would be I would completely agree with Dr. Bhutani and still say a no good letter is better than no letter at all.
I think an old letter that was very PED specific combined with newer letters would be worth including. But if it was an old letter and it wasn't PED specific, and you had better letters that were more recent, go for the more recent PED specific letters.
Awesome, thank you for that. One question about, as a PD, do you recommend sending letters of interest? I've read that some programs may or may not like that, depending on the program.
So I don't know if we might not like, but I don't know if we can review all of them. And in my experience, I may receive 15 in a day, and it might be a good day that I'm lucky to review all of them because I really try. But when I realize that it's a copy paste and that the just my name is different, and I can tell that my name is different because how the letter was or the email was written, I usually don't pay much attention. But if I see something that they discuss or that they mention about my specific program, that they went into the website, and I think someone already mentioned this, and that they mentioned something that we really offer, I might read the entire letter and reply. But again, imagine as program directors receiving hundreds of letters of intent. Sometimes it's extremely difficult to go over them. I don't know. I don't feel that I don't like it, but I might not be able to review all of them. So I would recommend send letters of intent to programs that you're really interested and not, to the 200 programs that exists,
If
I
I
would
may
say
add
that,
to that.
could I add on to the cut and paste, because it was mentioned before. I can't tell you how many times I get a cut and paste letter that does not have my name correctly in it, or it says family medicine in it, or it says something else completely wrong. And once I get that, I have to say I will completely negate the application, because that to me shows that there's a lack of concern, a lack of interest, that this is just, somebody spitting something out at me. So if you are going to use cut and paste, really be very careful. Look at everything you're sending out, because I get them all the time. It's sent to the family medicine program director at my hospital, and it's sent to my email address with her name and family medicine written in there. And I know that I got right above it was the letter to me. So I will immediately just delete those applications. I think letters of interest, again, it's the same thing as being, you can't be too pestery. If you want to send 1 or 2, certainly if there's an update to your application, you could send it, We don't get to read all of those letters. So, I mean, again, I think that you have to realistically understand that we're not able to read all the letters, but sometimes if there is a significant change in your application, if it does get read and we see that change, then again, it may alert us to something else that's going on. And thank you letters are always, again, a nice thing. It does show that you had an interest. And I think, again, if you write a thank you letter, it should be more personalized about what you think, what you liked about the program. It shouldn't be just a generic thank you letter, because again, we read these and I say, this is the same letter they're sending to everybody. If there's something that's specific about what I said in my introduction, what one of my residents may have said in their sort of interview, their group session with them, it has a lot more impact and meaning for me.
I completely agree with those comments. You certainly want to be respectful. One thing I think is a terrible thing to do. You want to portray yourself as professional as possible. If you send out an email with all the list of the schools that or programs that you're applying to, all right, that's nothing specifically special when you're communicating interests that way, just blanket shotgunning everything. So you really want to be respectful. The application process is very time intensive, very, very time intensive for lots of programs. So you want to represent yourself well, be as professional as you can, demonstrate that you can pay attention to detail. And that's what we'd be looking for.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I see, thank you to Dr. Dell, who's answering some of the questions in the chat. Next question is about what is the best approach when applying to combine PEDS programs, for example, triple board as a US IMG? Is it worth it to try to apply with how competitive the landscape is, or should one focus more on more categorical programs as an IMG? Anybody wants to speak to that?
I don't know much about the triple board program, but I know at Marshfield we have a MedPeds program, and we get wonderful applicants and a lot of IMGs. And I would encourage you to apply to MedPeds if you're interested in MedPeds. I don't know much about the triple board programs.
Awesome. Let us know if that answered your question, or just put it in the chat if you have a specific question about triple board, and we'll try to get to that. Another question is, would you recommend applying to a program that has a criteria of must be within 2 years of graduation if your YOG is more than 5 years? Should I apply anyways because it's a program I really like? I know we talked about this topic a little bit, but if anybody can kind of address this.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. You go ahead. Go ahead.
I think you shouldn't. If it almost seems like you've disregarded the information on the website, and unless again you have a really strong connection. But when somebody says "don't treat me like this" and you do that, it seems disrespectful. I would caution against that.
I mean, I was going to say, I think it's it's pretty much a waste of your time and potentially your money. If they say 2 years and you're 5 years or more out, if you want to apply to one program and do it as a gamble, most likely you won't even make their filter because of that. But again, you have to be realistic. I think again, when you're looking at the numbers of applications, looking at your application process, if something says 2 years and you're 5 years or more out, then you're really not even going to be probably in the radar. If you're 3 years out, then maybe they may be throwing their fishnet like a little bit further out now because of the number of applicants that we have in pediatrics. But I think after a certain point, it's a waste of time.
And I know this is another topic that we also previously hit on in the pre-planned questions, but would you say it's best to avoid applying to programs that historically haven't accepted many IMGs? And this additional question of what are the odds that a program's low IMG acceptance rate is maybe due to IMGs not really applying there?
I mean, I guess I would look at whether they explicitly sponsor visas. Because if they explicitly sponsor visas, somewhere on their website that they do that, even if they don't traditionally have a lot of IMGs in their program, they may be open to it now. And so I would look specifically to see if they say they sponsor visas. I would also, some places are more competitive than others just based on location. Like everyone wants to live, well, I don't know, at the beach or somewhere, fantastical. So there may be some reasons why certain programs attract more applicants. But I want you to really think about, where you would thrive as a learner, where you would thrive as a human being, what's going to make you, the most successful when you're applying, and not just think about prestige or what you think you're supposed to go after. Because there's a lot of great programs and we're all doing a great job training you guys. But there's a little different flavor. So you want to try to pick something that feels like the right fit for you.
I would echo that. I mean, I put that in the chat earlier. I was the first IMG in my residency program, and it wasn't that it was a program that didn't want IMGs. I think, many residency programs here just don't know enough about the international. There's so many international medical schools and not knowing anything about them. So it's more of a fear and an uncertainty and nothing against a particular school. And so if this is a place, as Dr. Wright mentioned, that you think you can live and you want to work, definitely, no question, you should apply to that program.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Another question is, how much of a disadvantage are you at by applying late for the match cycle? And this is actually a question we get quite often in general, if anyone can speak to how late is really late.
I think that's probably program dependent. We get a huge number of applications. A lot of places, I know that other people I've spoken to, they have enough applications, they have enough filter to go through, that they have enough people on their sort of list and even wait list that they don't need to go back and sort of go through the applications. It is, once again, it's a gamble. You have to, all these things you have to measure how much effort, how much time, and obviously how much money it's going to cost you. With virtual interviews, it makes the traveling, again, takes away the cost of travel, but there is a lot of effort that I think you have to put into your applications as well. And certainly there has to be, there's the cost of applying. You have potentially nothing to lose except for that. But you have to understand that like places like we have 11 spots, I get over 1,500 applications a year. I am the primary person who does the reviews the applications. And that's 1,500 pretty much almost at the start. So, again, as I'm going through these, I sometimes will look at other ones, but a lot of times it's just too much because I've already filtered out enough of them that I don't need to go back in again. And I've done my primary filter.
Yeah, I would echo that. Like you want to be as prepared as possible because if your application comes in late or comes in incomplete, you might not get reviewed because there are so many of them. And so if it comes in late, it might be perceived as, oh, you didn't get your other places that you wanted to go, so now this is your backup place. Or you didn't have it together and that's why it's late. So it's a little bit to your disadvantage to be late. So not that you can't do it, you might still match in a great program, but it's to your advantage to do it early and to have it complete.
Wonderful. A lot of the questions are being addressed in the chat, so thank you for doing that. There is a question I think that was already answered about if you're not ECFMG certified at the time of application, but you have all your scores, and then you become certified before the rank order list deadline, would that be considered a disadvantage? So I think somebody previously mentioned that that's not necessarily a disadvantage. So let me know if anybody want to add further.
Like I said, I think it really depends on your year of graduation, because if you've graduated and you have all of your scores, you should be able to get your certificate pretty much. If you're still in, the people who are particularly in the Caribbean medical schools, the IMGs that are particularly in the Caribbean medical schools, you're not going to get your ECFMG certificate until you graduate, actually. So that's not, again, that's not going to count against you. But people that have been out of medical school 3 years, 4 years, and have all their scores already, again, it's different in terms of the process and what you're looking at.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to have a step 2 score. Because if you don't have a step 2 score, I think you are at a disadvantage. I think that some of the other things can trickle in later. A step 3 score can trickle in later, and CMG can trickle in later. But a step 2 score really should be available early, if possible, because that's something that a lot of programs do check for.
We have another question here, kind of also based off of timeline. Can I still submit my application in September, but if my updated letters of rec will only be available by the end of October, do you recommend waiting to submit my application by October? What would be better?
I'd say do what gives you the best chance. In my opinion, that would be send it. And this is where a follow-up letter saying your letters are in would be helpful to prompt someone to go back and look, and quite respectful. Like, I'm really interested, my letters are in, and I'm updating you to go check. So that kind of update could work to your advantage. It's respectful, it's professional, it conveys interest. So I'd say send it and follow up.
Because we know that some of you don't have much control over when your letters get uploaded. You may be waiting for someone to write you a letter and get it uploaded. Obviously, you have to do your part in requesting that letter respectfully and in advance, but we know you're not completely in charge of that. So do all the parts that you are in charge of.
Wonderful. Another specific question regarding letters of recommendation. Should I use a letter of recommendation from my pediatric professor in medical school, even if I graduated 5 years ago? Again, I know we touched on this a little bit, but just any specific advice?
I mean, I think it's better, and this was already mentioned, to have a letter than not having it. And also linking this to the previous question, which was about letters of interest. I've had several letters of recommendation that they specified that the applicant is applying to internal medicine or OB or other specialties. So, and it could be a great, pediatric physician, right? But once I see that, I just don't invite that applicant because I already know that this applicant is looking for something else that is not PEDS. So I think it's better, yes, of course, having from a physician, in the past 2 years is the best. But I think the quality of the letter at the end, it's extremely important, or more important than, that year, I believe.
Wonderful. And I know we're pretty close to being at the end of time here. So there's one general question about, can you give some tips regarding interviews? So maybe any quick tips regarding interviews before we hop off of the call here.
So I just like to say this when I counsel any students, and I do counsel medical students from an IMG medical school from the Caribbean. I look at your interview almost as an episode of Law and Order, and I tell them that anything that you put on your application can and will be used against you. And anything that's in your application, you should be able to discuss. You should not be filling your application with fluff that you can't discuss, with research that you don't really understand, with experiences that are superficial and you have no understanding of what's going on, hobbies. Anything you put in there, if they match you up with a person who has that same hobby, has that same interest, and they ask you a question about it and you can't answer it, it looks horrible and your application becomes void. You don't need to be like, if you put in French cooking, you don't need to be Julia Child, but you do need to tell me what's your favorite recipe, what's your favorite thing to cook. All right, or why that's your favorite, again, why that's your favorite recipe or why that's your favorite cuisine. You can't just put something down and assume that you're not going to be asked that. So I think, again, everything that you put in should be meaningful and should be something that you could actually address during the interview as well.
I would just like to say that the interview is your opportunity to really demonstrate your ability to connect to another human being. And we're looking for people who can connect to our patients, who can connect to our families. And so try to make a connection and be genuine and be yourself and show us that, show us someone that our patients would enjoy talking to and would be able to connect to and would feel like cared about them. So try to be genuine. Try to let us get to know your personality. And if English is not your first language, develop your layman's English, because that's going to help you in any residency that you go to.
You know, with that in mind, if English is not your first language, especially I think on the internet, if you don't understand a question, if you didn't hear it clearly, ask them to repeat it or ask them to explain what they're looking for. Because if you give me like a 5-minute answer to a question that has nothing to do with what I asked, it's going to be much worse than you saying to me, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? And I think that's, again, another thing that people are hesitant because they feel as though it's going to be a mark against them. But it's worse to not really be able to answer the question that I've asked you and just to sort of say something that has nothing to do with anything.
The last thing I would add to that, during the interviews, remember you're also interviewing us or the faculty. So be curious. You want to know, can you see yourself there? It's not something that's just done to you. Ask questions, and try to see, is this a good fit for you? Because you want to have that feeling that, I can see this person here. This person envisions themselves working. Is this someone I want to work with? Is this someone my patients would enjoy? So please ask questions and really try to connect. Be yourself. Don't necessarily try to fake it or mislead people. Pediatricians tend to read that fairly well.
And one other, I'm sorry, I just want to make one other point. A lot of people are using behavioral interview questions. All of these questions are available online, and it's another thing, you could read through them and again, be prepared. It's always best to be, your application, you're prepared to discuss everything. When they ask you behavioral questions, you may not be as well prepared. It just gives you an opportunity to look at the kinds of things they may be asking you that are sort of not, about your research, not necessarily about your clinical work. They are a little bit different. They do take a little bit more thought, and we are looking to see sort of what makes you tick when we ask them. And it's a good idea to look at those questions sometimes.
And the last thing that I would like to add is be honest. Be honest of who you are and what you're looking for. It's extremely common that even in the thank you letters, or applicants will mention that PEDS is their first choice, whatever. And at the end of the ranking, we receive a list of where or the people that we rank match. And it's extremely, sad to see that we thought that we had really good applicants, that they really showed us that they wanted PEDS and they ended up matching in other services, and I feel that as a failure as a program director, because I was not able to realize that someone was lying to me in my face. So I always recommend be honest, and don't promise things that you are not willing to commit. You know what I mean? So I think honesty is the base for success as human beings. So.
Wonderful. And Dr. Bhutani, if you wanted to add anything to what any of the panelists have said. Okay. Great. So we are just a few minutes over time. Just wanted to say thank you again to Dr. Bhutani, Dr. Sanchez, Dr. Okori, Dr. Crata, Dr. Wright. Really provided some really valuable, wonderful information for our panelists today. Really appreciate having your support at FPR. If we could just advance the slide one more, just wanted to give everyone a reminder that we have a few more webinars coming up this month, and we always have our website open. So feel free to contact us or link up with our Instagram, and hope this was helpful. And everybody enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yeah, I just also want to say that on behalf of myself, but also I think most of the people in chat, we really appreciate how empathetic all of the panelists have been, but also at the same time being transparent about the process. And just we really, really appreciate all the help and wish this could go on for a few more hours. But of course, I have to end it here. But thank you very much for joining us.
Do you
And
mind if I say one more thing?
of course,
I know
thank you.
we've spent a fair amount of time talking about, IMGs at being somewhat of at a disadvantage just because there are so many that do apply. But just keep in mind, most of the panelists here, a lot of program directors have had such an amazing experience with students from all over the world. IMG students, a lot of them have been our top students, residents, have come back to be some of our best faculty. So we know that you all have amazing things to offer. And so come in and knock our socks off.
Great words of wisdom to end with.
And Dr. Wright, I just want to mention that it's extremely important. Do not forget where you come from, because eventually you're going to be probably, co-attending with one of us, and we need to help, further, other IMGs that will be coming in a couple of years. So never forget from where you're coming from. It's extremely important.
Definitely. And I just see some last questions in the chat about where to access the recording. It'll be available later on the website. I know I'll be rewatching it and certainly recommend some of you do as well. As some additional information on the website, we'll also have information about lots of the programs, including some of the programs that you see the program directors of today. So definitely be on the lookout for that. And thank you very much for attending, everyone, and thank you again to our panelists.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
have a great rest of your evening or wherever it is for those around the world joining us this evening or today.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Take care. Bye.